A Second Chance at Love. Previous episodes are available in playlist, a link is given in the video description. Episode 85. Tears of Happiness. The joyous and lively ambience of a traditional wedding was unparalleled and could not be matched by any other modern wedding. At 3:30 in the morning, Roxanne was already dressed in a classic wedding gown with her face adorned with light makeup. Despite the veil obstructing her view, Roxanne's excitement was palpable as she eagerly awaited Lucian to lift her veil. Close relatives of the Farwell family had come to lend a hand, filling the multi-story manor with the sounds of cheerful conversation and laughter. The three little children were playing and chasing each other before running into Roxanne's room. While Archie and Benny donned festive traditional outfits, Estella wore a beautiful traditional gown. They were chattering excitedly in front of Roxanne. "Mommy, your wedding gown is so pretty. Can I take a look at your face?" Estella asked out of curiosity. Archie interjected, "No. We cannot remove the veil. Only Daddy can do that." Yet, a traditional wedding has a lot of rituals and ceremonies. That's why it's festive and fun. Benny chimed in. The children, fascinated by the various items used in the rituals, began studying them intently. When the moment finally arrived, a few female masters of ceremonies went in to escort Roxanne out of the room. They helped her up the wedding carriage and headed straight to the manor. Starting from the manor, they followed each ritual step by step according to the set schedule. After stepping out of the carriage, Roxanne entered the manor and was greeted by Lucian. They then exchanged wedding rings, recited the wedding vows, and sealed the deal with a kiss. "Let's have a toast," someone exclaimed, hoping to further liven up the atmosphere. "Time to lead the newlyweds to their room," the professional masters of ceremonies announced. Every ritual was accompanied by heartfelt blessings, joyful cheers, and thunderous applause from the growing number of relatives and friends who had gathered to witness the wedding. Lucian could no longer suppress his emotions upon noticing the veil. "Despite having been through it once before, why am I still feeling nervous on my wedding day?" Meanwhile, Roxanne remained still, but her heart was filled with anticipation. She felt the moment Lucian lifted her veil would mark the beginning of their life together forever. Finally, Lucian carefully lifted the veil. As their eyes met, both of them could not help but giggle bashfully. Their gentle gazes locked as they met each other's eyes. "We've finally completed the rituals," Lucian exclaimed, looking at Roxanne, who was still adorned in her wedding gown, her beauty taking his breath away. "Yes. The ceremony's finally over. From now on, I'll be your wife forever." Roxanne could not help but feel emotional, her eyes rippling with waves of motion. Eventually, she fell into the man's embrace as he reached out to hug her. Yet, it was not the right time to consummate their marriage as they had another modern-style wedding to attend in the afternoon. Following the Master of Ceremonies' requirements, the newlyweds had to stay in the room for a while. The traditional wedding finally ended when Elias and Sonia, as the elders of the family, completed the remaining ceremonies. With that, the banquet began promptly. A limited amount of alcohol was served at the event to ensure guests would not overindulge and be unable to attend the modern wedding in the afternoon. The newlyweds, the three young children along with their grandparents, were seated at the main table alongside Jonathan, James, Madeline, and Lorraine. They deliberately left a seat vacant to display the bracelet Roxanne had treasured for many years. That bracelet was a gift from her mother, and placing it on the table was a way to symbolize her mother's presence at the wedding. Roxanne looked around and glanced at Madeline, her in-laws, her husband, and her children before turning her attention to the bracelet. Her eyes instantly filled with tears of happiness that she could not hold back. A big gift for you. More guests were invited to the modern wedding in the afternoon, as the open field in the manor was much larger than a soccer field. Countless luxury cars of the world's top brands arrived one after another. The venue was adorned with enchanting decors complete with the ethereal allure of dry ice, which wafted gently to create a whimsical and otherworldly ambience. Each guest who attended the wedding had an extraordinary background and came from all over the world. When Roxanne appeared in her wedding gown, all the socialites and ladies from the higher echelons of society were in awe of her beauty. They all felt that only Roxanne was worthy of Lucian. Taking in her appearance, image, temperament, or ability, everything matched perfectly. Naturally, the wedding was not without its share of surprises. Archie and Benny made a grand entrance by arriving in a hot air balloon, accompanied by security personnel, and showering petals onto the ground below. Meanwhile, Estella descended safely from a zipline in her traditional dress, appearing like a magical fairy. She then handed Lucian and Roxanne a pair of rings. In front of a larger crowd, they once again recited their vows before the priest and exchanged their wedding rings. Lucian then gently kissed his wife's forehead. He opted to forego the toast that was supposed to follow the ceremony, as he was concerned that Roxanne might be weary and in need of rest. After all, she had been awake since 3 in the morning. In the end, Elias and Sonia represented the newlyweds to entertain the guests for the rest of the afternoon. At the wedding, a tacit agreement seemed to have been reached among all the guests, as no one took pictures during the ceremony. It was widely acknowledged that doing so would have breached the expected decorum for such a dignified event. Therefore, not a single photo leaked from the entire event. The news of Lucian and Roxanne's wedding did not surface on the Intelnet until evening, but when it did, it quickly made headlines on major websites. Countless netizens began actively discussing the newlyweds. Of course, it also inevitably sparked a controversy. While some regarded Lucian and Roxanne as a match made in heaven, others felt that Roxanne was not as competent as some had claimed. They also opined that her reputation as a miracle doctor, combined with her various investments, might not be entirely genuine. Nevertheless, Lucian and Roxanne chose to ignore the criticism and smiled, allowing others to say what they wished. While some were pleased with the turn of events, some were not. Christina, who was on a luxury cruise heading back to Hawaiian, was hopping mad when she learned that it was Roxanne's wedding day. She gritted her teeth, and a sharp glint flashed across her eyes. In a shabby rented apartment in Harrington, Winnie gave the drunken Grant an earful, and soon, an argument erupted between them. Meanwhile, Sean from the Crawford family was not invited to the wedding. His cousin, Jonas Crawford, took his place at the ceremony. An opportunity finally came knocking on Jonas' door. "It's time for me to take Lucian on." After the ceremony, Roxanne slept for a couple of hours. When she woke up and walked to the living hall, she noticed the banquet in the open field was nearing its end. Madeline, with a flushed face and eyes slightly glazed from alcohol, got up to her. "I almost forgot I promised to give you a big gift," Madeline's speech was noticeably slower than usual. Noticing her unsteady state, Roxanne quickly helped her up to prevent her from collapsing. She did forget the gift that Madeline had promised her. What could it be? Madeline rummaged through her bag and fished something out of it. It was a copy of the house deed. Roxanne knitted her brows. Don't tell me you're going to give me a house. I don't need another house. Look, we already have this big manor. Madeline waved her hand dismissively, gave her the house deed, and grinned. You're right. I am giving you a house. You gave me a mansion, so in return, I'm giving you another property. Don't worry, my salary as the director is quite substantial, and my mother has also contributed some money as well, so we bought it for you. Roxanne wondered why her best friend would go to such great lengths to buy her a property. There must be something special about the house. With that, she went through the house deed and looked at the address. Instantly, she was stunned. Isn't this the old house my mom and I used to live in when I was a child? Many years ago, her father, Grant Jarvis, sold the house for a mansion. Roxanne looked up at her best friend, her eyes filled with excitement. Madeline, how thoughtful of you to do this for me. I can't believe you bought it back. Thank you so much. I knew you would like it. Madeline chuckled. Suddenly, her eyelids grew heavier, and she nearly fell over. None of your business. Following the wedding, the entire family moved in permanently to the manor, including Elias and Sonia, who had been residing in the Farwell main residence. The decision was made by the two to relocate to make it easier to take care of the 3 children. Meanwhile, Peregrine went as far as insisting that Roxanne take a 1-week wedding leave to allow herself to relax at home. Originally, Lucian planned to have their honeymoon right away, but with the upcoming peak holiday season, he was worried about the massive crowd. Therefore, Roxanne persuaded him to postpone it. It was a beautiful day with fantastic weather. The children were having a blast in the backyard, sweating profusely on the small football field. Estella, despite being a girl, loved to learn everything from Archie and Benny, and her dribbling skills looked quite flawless. Meanwhile, Lucian and Roxanne had set up a picnic blanket near the small lake and filled it with a variety of food, including barbecue steak, vegetable salad, fruits, and snacks. Lucian had even brought along a camping coffee pot and proceeded to light up the alcohol burner to begin the process of making coffee. As the high-quality Yirgacheffe coffee dissolved in hot water, its unique fragrance instantly filled the air. It had a scent of peanut brittle and the aroma of osmanthus at the same time. Lucian brewed just enough coffee for 2 small couple mugs. Then, he carefully handed one to his wife. Take a sniff first. Don't rush to drink it. It's still quite hot. Lucian's face showed more tenderness compared to before. Roxanne accepted the mug, and a happy smile spread across her face. The aroma of the coffee was indeed excellent. Roxanne blew on it to cool it down and took a sip to taste it. She instantly tasted the fragrance and felt it penetrate her nostrils. The coffee was slightly bitter with a hint of sourness, but she could sense a sweet aftertaste. When she took a sip of plain water after that, she noticed that the water had somehow turned sweet. Roxanne had grown to love these cozy moments dearly. She beckoned the children to come and drink some water to stay hydrated. Not long after, the children grew tired from playing and became hungry. They started digging into the food. Before long, Elias and Sonia arrived to join them. They had even brought an outdoor tea set and began to sip tea while chatting. As they were family, they could freely discuss anything and express their emotions without the need to conceal anything. "Roxanne, did Grant and Winnie come to bother you again?" Sonia asked. Roxanne shook her head. "No, I figured they're probably too embarrassed to bother me, and I doubt they have the courage. Mom, I'm part of the Farwell family now. They wouldn't dare." "You're right. If they try to harm or bully you, don't hesitate to let us know," Sonia reassured her. Roxanne nodded earnestly. Unfortunately, leisure time always seemed to pass too quickly. In the blink of an eye and amid harmonious conversations, the evening had already arrived. As Lucian and Roxanne were packing up their outdoor equipment, Roxanne's phone suddenly rang. Roxanne checked the caller ID, and it was a stranger's number. She frowned at it and answered. "I must congratulate you, Roxanne, for marrying into such a prestigious family. However, how could you treat my mother so disrespectfully? Who do you think you are? Do you think you can trample on someone else's dignity just because you have money now? Listen, don't let me catch you. Otherwise, I'll teach you a lesson anytime," the caller said. The voice was so familiar that Roxanne couldn't forget it for the rest of her life. Instantly, a hint of anger appeared on Roxanne's face. She coldly rebuked, "Yuliana, you never grow up. Do you think this is still 10 years ago?" The person on the other side of the phone was at a loss for words. After some time, Yuliana continued, "So what if you are living a good life now? The fact that none of your family attended the wedding made you a laughingstock. Roxanne, how could someone like you deserve happiness?" Roxanne had intended to argue back at Yuliana, but as she looked at the children running and playing around, something inside her suddenly calmed down, and her anger dissipated. "It appears that I don't need to respond to challenges from people I don't like. Therefore," Roxanne put on a composed tone and responded, "I don't see how you could consider you people to be a part of my family. Whether I'm happy or not has nothing to do with you. Please refrain from bothering me in the future." With that, Roxanne hung up right away. "I killed someone." After packing the picnic blanket, Lucian turned and asked, "Was that Yuliana?" Roxanne nodded, and a small smile appeared on her lips. "Don't worry. I can handle her. She no longer has any power to bully me." "Okay." As matter of fact, Lucian wasn't worried. After all, his wife's state of mind had changed completely. Roxanne's individual abilities were strong enough to make her powerful, even without the backup of the Farwell family. After packing everything up and returning to the Manor's living room, Roxanne noticed Sonia and the chefs were busy preparing dinner and decided to lend a hand in the kitchen. Meanwhile, Archie and Benny were chatting with Lucian about the interesting things that happened at school. Estella, on the other hand, was preoccupied with designing a gown. Not long after dinner, James suddenly arrived at the Manor in a hurry. Lucian's heart sank as he saw the anxiousness on James' face, and he quickly asked what had happened. James looked crestfallen and dejected. Seeing that there were no outsiders around, he decided to speak up. "Lucian, my mother's hysteria has been getting worse lately. She's been displaying violent behavior, and I don't know what to do anymore. I came here to ask Roxanne if she knows of any way to help my mother," James explained. After hearing James' explanation, Roxanne and Lucian exchanged surprised glances. They were surprised because they had never heard James mention anything about his mother having hysteria. Even Elias and Sonia rushed over to ask about the condition of James' mother, Jennifer Thompson. "What do you mean? Why didn't you tell us about your mother's hysteria before?" Elias asked, his expression turning angry as he realized he was not aware of the situation. "It seems like you and your father have been keeping this from us for years. Why would you hide something like this?" "What do you mean? Why didn't you tell us about your mother's hysteria before?" Elias asked, his expression turning angry as he realized he was not aware of the situation. "It seems like you and your father have been keeping this from us for years. Why would you hide something like this?" James stayed silent, but his lack of response was an admission in itself. Afterward, James gave a brief explanation about the illness Jennifer had been suffering from all these years. Hysteria was often regarded as a mental illness, as it was a mental disorder that usually occurred when someone experienced significant emotional trauma. The symptoms of hysteria often include dissociative and adjustment disorders. During a dissociative state, individuals may experience a sense of losing their identity and had severe doubts and unclear speculations about themselves. In other words, they didn't know who they were. On the other hand, during an adjustment state, an individual's temperament may suddenly change, appearing entirely different from their typical self. My mother's illness manifested about a decade ago. We managed to keep it in check through therapy and medication, and she was able to lead a fairly normal life. At one point, we even thought that she had fully recovered. Unfortunately, during a recent trip to Allender with my parents, something unexpected happened and triggered my mother's illness and made it uncontrollable again." Lucian could feel his heart lurched. No wonder James looked weird when we picked him up at the airport that day. Roxanne was also taken aback by the news. It reminded her of Lucian's previous comment that he never expected James to become a psychologist. It seemed that the root of his choice was his mother. Perhaps he became a psychologist because of his mother's illness. What exactly happened in Allender? Sonia pressed on with her questioning. Everyone was curious about the kind of severe trauma that would trigger Jennifer's mental disorder. James' expression suddenly became gloomy, and he started blinking rapidly as if trying to avoid recalling the events of that time. After hesitating for a few seconds, he finally decided to tell the truth. "It was me. I killed someone." Everyone at the scene was shocked after hearing that. Advise him. As James recounted the events, Sonia and Roxanne didn't display the same look of shock as before, but they felt a sense of unease for the family. Since Sonia and Roxanne were both women, they took some time to process the information and remained stunned for a while. On the other hand, Elias was quick to snap out of it and immediately asked for clarification. "Please explain everything clearly. Under what circumstances did you have to make such a decision? It must have been a dangerous situation, right? If you had killed someone maliciously, would you even be able to come back now?" His words were actually directed at Sonia and Roxanne. Sonia and Roxanne snapped out of their daze and turned their attention to James, anticipating his response. "Yes, it was a robbery. My parents and I were on a trip to the grasslands to see wildlife when we were robbed by some local thugs. We cooperated and gave them all our money. However, the leader of the thugs wanted to kidnap my mother. So, in a desperate situation, I had to use my gun. Allender was a place of chaos and housed many unforeseen dangers. Due to the safety issues of the country, people were allowed to bear arms. Therefore, it was permissible for James to carry firearm at that time because it was a means of self-protection against the extremely ferocious wild animals in the grasslands in the event of an uncontrollable situation. Little did he expect that this trip would result in a situation where he had to take a life in self-defense. The happenings at the time instantly shocked Jennifer, and her hysteria began to take over due to fear, causing her to speak incoherently. Finally, the local authorities arrested the thugs and quickly took Jennifer to the hospital for emergency treatment. However, the hospital at that time did not even meet basic hygiene standards, let alone equipped with any facilities for mental treatment. Fortunately, James, being a psychologist, was able to use hypnosis to induce sleep in Jennifer, and his father, Jones, promptly took Jennifer out of Allender. After my mother returned, I invited all the well-known psychological experts I knew to our house. The treatment process lasted for more than half a month. Meanwhile, I was trapped in Allender dealing with the whole thing and was only released afterward. When I returned home, I worried that if my mother saw me, she would remember the scene of me firing the gun. So, I lied to Lucian and didn't go home directly. James pulled the corners of his mouth into a wry smile and nodded. "Okay, I'll take note." After James finished speaking, Lucian felt a surge of anger in his heart. Hence, he cast a cold glance at James. "How could you try to hide such a serious incident from me? You're really foolish." James didn't dare to argue with Lucian, and his face was full of apologies. Of course, Lucian wouldn't really blame him. He immediately looked at Roxanne. "I understand. You are aware of the urgent situation at home, but you're uncertain whether Mrs. Lon would become more agitated upon seeing you. Therefore, are you considering letting me try instead?" Roxanne looked at James, waiting for his confirmation. James nodded. His eyes were full of hope. "I can do that without any problem. Lucian and I will go to your house to check things out now. You don't have to worry too much. You've mentioned that there are plenty of psychology experts at your house, so it shouldn't be a big problem," Roxanne reassured after agreeing to help James without hesitation. Lucian also stood up, approached James, and patted him on the shoulder. "You learned this from Jonathan, didn't you? I'll forgive you this time, but I don't want the same thing to happen again in the future," Lucian warned in a serious tone. Since there was no time to lose, they immediately headed toward James' house. James drove, and after half an hour of speeding, they arrived at the Lon family's mansion. The car pulled up at the front door, and James didn't plan to go in with them. "I don't think it's appropriate for me to appear right now. I'm counting on you, Lucian, Roxanne." The couple gave him a reassuring look and quickly walked into the mansion. Since they had informed Jones beforehand, the latter was waiting to greet them by the door. He immediately stepped forward when he noticed Roxanne and Lucian. "Go ahead and try." Upon entering the hall, they were greeted by the sight of many psychologists engaging in a lively discussion. "Lucian, is this Roxanne? Jones looked at Roxanne and then apologized, I'm really sorry I couldn't attend your wedding. Please don't worry about it, Mr. Lon. After all, there are some special circumstances at home, Roxanne replied, having learned to treat those with close relationships with the Farwell family as close acquaintances. They noticed Jones' gaze directed toward the outside. Lucian quickly explained, James won't be coming in for now. He's worried that Mrs. Lon may be triggered if she sees him. But don't worry, he's fine. The worries on Jones' face subsided slowly after hearing Lucian's assurance. He gave a nod and commented, Lucian, you're very caring. I'm genuinely concerned that my son is being too hard on himself. In reality, all of this was simply an unexpected event. Please help me in advising him. Upon entering the hall, they were greeted by the sight of many psychologists engaging in a lively discussion. Leading the group was Robert Zucker, a renowned psychologist in the country and the mentor who guided James into the field of psychology. Roxanne had heard her mentor mention Robert before. The man had been researching psychology for more than 30 years and had written many books on the subject, including one on criminal psychology that had become a textbook for the police. This time, Robert brought along several students with him. Not only was he treating Yennefer, but he was also taking the opportunity to teach his students some key points. There were other famous doctors present, but none as renowned as Robert, who was at the center of the scene, with everyone discussing solutions based on his ideas. When Robert saw Lucian and Roxanne enter, he glanced at them and gestured for everyone to quiet down before walking up to Lucian. Mr. Farwell, hello. Are you here to visit the patient? Lucian's face was constantly appearing in the media, so it was no surprise that he was recognized. He decided to return Robert's show of courtesy and shook the man's hand. Hello, I am Lucian Farwell. You must be Professor Zucker. It's an honor to meet you. We are relieved to have such a renowned doctor treating Mrs. Lon. Robert appreciated the compliment coming from someone of Lucian's status and nodded with a smile. Then, he turned to Roxanne and greeted her, Mrs. Farwell, hello. Roxanne was gradually getting used to the title and nodded in response. Lucian suddenly said, Professor Zucker, it's quite a coincidence that my wife is also a famous doctor. She's here today to see if there's anything she can do to help Mrs. Lon. Robert politely replied, I've heard of Dr. Jarvis' reputation, but I didn't expect her to be so young. However, his tone abruptly changed. Then again, Mrs. Lon's condition is related to psychology. I'm afraid Dr. Jarvis' expertise in pathology might not be of much help. Roxanne frowned slightly, sensing the hint of disdain in his words. Lucian also noticed and countered with a smile, that's not necessarily true. Some psychological conditions can indeed be treated through pathological methods. We're just trying out every method that might work, after all. Robert begrudgingly agreed, well, it's worth a try. Jones, who was nearby, sensed the tension and quickly introduced other psychologists to Lucian and Roxanne. He then led the couple into the room to visit Yennefer. After they entered, Robert's expression turned cold. Roxanne Jarvis is a disciple of Harvey Lambert. Humph, what use can she be in treating this psychological illness? He had a history of grudges against Harvey, so naturally, he wouldn't warm up to Roxanne. Roxanne, however, was unaware of this. Then, she and Lucian saw Yennefer, who was asleep and looked haggard, with ghastly-looking scratches on her arms. The room was a mess, with shattered and broken items everywhere. Jones looked at his wife's pale face with concern and turned to Roxanne. "Roxanne, I've heard that your skills in traditional medicine are extraordinary, especially acupuncture. That's why I asked James to invite you here. Go ahead and try your best." "All right, I'll give it a try. I won't say more for now. Furthermore, we'll have to wait for Mrs. Lon's symptoms to flare up before we can know if the treatment is effective," Roxanne said calmly. As a doctor, it was crucial for her to maintain emotional composure. "Yes, but she's bound for another fit. The sedative won't last long this time around. When that happens, you all need to be careful. She might not recognize anyone," Jones said with a worried expression. "The rumor from years ago." Yennefer, who was in a deep sleep, appeared gauntly. However, her slender and delicate features were of a typical southern woman's, giving people a gentle and approachable feeling. However, everything changed in less than 15 minutes. As the sedative wore off, she slowly woke up, her eyes empty and confused as she looked at her surroundings. Jones approached her and tried calling her name several times, but Yennefer did not respond at all. With a disappointed expression, Jones quickly fetched 2 straps and fastened them to Yennefer's wrists. Seeing this scene, Roxanne frowned slightly. Wouldn't such a restraint method only further provoke her? Just as she thought this, Yennefer's face suddenly changed, her previously lifeless eyes turned sharp, and a vicious expression appeared on her face. "Let me go! What are you doing? Jones, release me now! You'll come to a bad end! How dare you treat me like this? Call James over! I want him to pay with his life! Do you think you can keep me trapped like this? Where is that kid, James?" Her current state was nothing like the calm and composed Yennefer Lucian once knew. In addition to her hysterical screams, Yennefer desperately tried to break free from the straps, eventually standing up from the bed and suddenly appearing in front of Roxanne. Her twisted face, filled with anger and hatred, startled Roxanne. Fortunately, Lucian reacted quickly, pulling Roxanne back and behind him. Jones' warning had only come right then. "Be careful, don't get too close. She will scratch and bite. It's happening again." "Ah, Mr. Lon, why would Mrs. Lon want to hurt James?" Roxanne regained her composure, no longer afraid, as she had seen many patients with mania before. Despite that, she couldn't help but feel puzzled. In this altered state, it was as if the mentally ill patient's consciousness had been replaced by another person. What kind of consciousness has taken over Yennefer's body at this moment? Some scientists had proposed that mentally ill patients might be experiencing confusion between 2 personalities from different dimensions, leading to incoherent speech and strange behavior. Before Jones could answer, Robert and several other psychologists entered the room. Robert nodded slightly and said calmly, "Allow me to explain from the psychological perspective. In her current state, Ms. Thompson probably imagines herself as her twin sister, Sheba Thompson, due to some past trauma. As for the reason, Mr. Lon has not discussed it with us in detail. As for why she would hate her own nephew, I'm afraid only Mr. Lon knows." After he finished speaking, all the doctors looked toward Jones. Lucian felt a sinking feeling in his heart. It seemed that the rumor from years ago was true. He vaguely remembered that James had mentioned this incident before. It happened in Zendale before the Lawn family moved to Horrington. The Thompson sisters met Jones around the same time, and both fell in love with him. In the end, Jones chose Yennefer, the elder sister. Sheba, the younger sister, was repressed for a while but eventually seemed to accept the harsh truth. However, it turned out that what Sheba displayed was only a false appearance. In fact, she was constantly jealous of her sister, Yennefer. Her evil thoughts clouded her mind, and she even plotted to secretly poison her sister, hoping to make her disabled. In doing so, she could become Yennefer's replacement and stay by Jones' side forever. Twin sister, she was executing her plan the other day in the kitchen, spiking the soup with a drug that would cause major damage to the nerves. Sheba never thought that James would sneak into the kitchen for food in the middle of his study. Thus, he witnessed what she was doing. James was initially confused by what she was doing, so he asked her about it. However, Sheba panicked. She tried to lie to James. Alas, James was a smart boy. He did not believe what she said, and he decided to tell his parents about it. Sheba became frantic, and she quickly ran after him to stop him. James was a child, after all. He thrashed in her grip and screamed. Sheba pinned him down, but he kicked her in response, making her stumble backward. At that moment, Yennefer and Jones returned. That was how they watched Sheba lose her balance and fall into the deep well. Perhaps Sheba had knocked her head on her way down and passed out, for she sunk without even getting the chance to scream. Jones and Yennefer hastily tried to save her, but it took them forever and a day to get her out of the well. By then, it was too late. Sheba was dead. James never expected that to happen. His father beat him terribly despite how he tried to tell him again and again about what he saw. Ultimately, they found evidence of his aunt's attempted poisoning in the kitchen. The loss of her sister and the revelation of Sheba's plan broke Yennefer. Her mental breakdown led to a terrible period of illness, and she was in a coma for half a month. When Yennefer woke again, she was no longer quite the same. The trauma made her manic. She would act exactly like her younger sister, Sheba Thompson, whenever she was in one of her episodes. That year, James had been 13. From then on, every time his mother had her episode, she would see James as her enemy and hurl insults at him. James was depressed for a while, but in the end, he decided to become a psychologist to save his mother from her mental illness. After countless research and visits to various famed doctors, he finally figured out that his mother's illness was probably born out of her connection to her twin sister. His mother, Yennefer, was unable to process the traumatic incident, so another alter identity was formed in her, and that identity was her sister, Sheba. Moreover, Yennefer mimicked the fear Sheba felt before the latter's death. That was why she subconsciously assumed her sister would deem James as an enemy. Every time Yennefer had her episode, she would go on and on about killing James. James was on the verge of breaking down after witnessing his mother's episodes. Yet, he never gave up. He continued visiting various countries for his mother. As a matter of fact, he started becoming superstitious. When he heard that there was an ancient shaman in Allender who could control episodes like his mother's, he decided to bring his mother to the shaman. The truth was that they had gone to Allender a few years ago, and they had found a supposed shaman to treat Yennefer. Perhaps subconsciously, Yennefer knew that if the entire family would be affected if she continued to have these episodes. Perhaps the ceremony really did have a psychological effect. In any case, Yennefer's condition stabilized after that trip. The shaman was close to death on their second trip to Allender. After visiting the shaman, the family stayed for the shaman's funeral. Then, they planned to visit Allender's grasslands to see the wildlife. No one expected an accident to happen. To protect his parents, James shot the thugs dead. The scene shocked Yennefer and triggered her memories of her sister's death. Unsurprisingly, her condition worsened again. Effective in the room, Jones was slowly telling them what had happened in the past. Sure enough, Lucian realized the many details were the secrets James once told him. However, James never told him about his reason for studying psychology. Still, Lucian could make a guess. His mood was a roller coaster. Like Jonathan, James still kept many things a secret from him. Meanwhile, Roxanne had a look of surprise on her face. She never thought there would be so many twists and turns in the story. Her heart sank. She never thought the unbothered and mild-mannered James would be bearing such a heavy weight on his shoulders. If he were someone else, perhaps he would have been crushed by the weight. Robert Zucker and the other psychologists had similar somber expressions on their faces. They finally found out the origin of Yennefer's condition. So, Ms. Thompson's previous recovery was due to the placebo effect. Since we now know what happened, let's continue adjusting our treatment plan. Mr. Lon, please give us a minute. Let's have a meeting, Robert said. Robert was a famous psychologist who had seen many similar cases. To some extent, individuals with mental illness had experienced a multitude of tragedies that pushed them further and further into despair. Jones nodded and led Robert and the other psychologists out of the room. He acted as if he did not hear the cries of his wife behind him, but Roxanne and Lucian noticed the dullness in his eyes. It was a look that stemmed from numbness after the misery. The indifference was only a show he put up. Jones was the primary support of the Lon family. To save his mother, his son had walked down a different path. Jones could not afford to break down nor let himself feel the sorrow. Soon, Roxanne, Lucian, and the screaming Yennefer were the only ones left in the room. It seemed like Yennefer was agitated as she screamed for people to let her go. She wanted to look for James to punish him. Lucian, I'll try to use acupuncture to calm Mrs. Lon down first. She'll probably need therapy from a psychologist for the rest of her treatment. At most, I can only halt her episodes. A look of melancholy crossed Roxanne's face. Lucian nodded and reminded her, do your best, but don't stress yourself out too much. With that, he slowly approached Yennefer from behind before hastily grabbing Yennefer's head to stop her from struggling. With a glint, 3 needles appeared in Roxanne's hands. She then walked to Lucian's side and swiftly inserted the needles into the acupuncture points on Yennefer's head. 1, 2, 3. As the needles were inserted, Yennefer's scrunched-up face relaxed. In the end, Roxanne used 9 needles on Yennefer's head. Yennefer calmed down completely, but in the next second, To their surprise, her eyes rolled up, and she fell backward. Roxanne reacted in time and quickly supported her with an arm around her waist. "Lucian, quick, undo her restraints. We'll carry her onto the bed." In mortal danger, Roxanne shook her head and politely denied it. The truth was that she was using cerulean needle technique's last move. To do the challenging technique of inserting needles into the head, one had to possess strong mental fortitude and the capability to improvise. Whenever her mentor did acupuncture on a patient's head, her mentor would preset the depth of the insertion to avoid accidents. However, things were urgent earlier. Roxanne had noticed Yennefer's bloodshot eyes, agitation, and skyrocketing blood pressure. The stress on her heart had been too much for her. Thus, Roxanne reminded Jones, "Mr. Lon, we can't delay any further in treating Mrs. Lon's condition. We have to stabilize it as soon as possible. Otherwise, she'll be in mortal danger if her blood pressure gets too high and her heart can't keep up." Jones solemnly nodded, but there was a helpless look on his face. "I know. That's why I hired so many psychologists, but the main issue we now have is Yennefer's instant agitation upon waking up. She doesn't have a period of calmness that will allow her to receive her treatment. Maybe I can lend you a helping hand with that if you trust me," Roxanne muttered. As if he had finally found a buoy in the middle of the vast sea, Jones visibly brightened up. Of course, of course." The couple then exerted much strength to put her comfortably on the bed. Perhaps Jones had noticed the lack of crying. He came running to check on Yennefer. When he saw his wife lying on the bed peacefully and the needles in her head, he immediately figured out what was going on. Roxanne's really a miracle worker. Her acupuncture's working. "Thank you so much, Roxanne. You're really an amazing doctor. I can't believe this works so quickly. I hired a traditional medicine practitioner in the past too, but they couldn't do anything about her condition," Jones exclaimed. "You have no idea how happy I am to hear you say that. No matter what methods you use, you have my full support." Right as Jones said that, Roxanne tugged Lucian. She then leaned closer to his ear to whisper to him her plan. Frankly, she was not confident in that plan. She was worried that Jones would not agree to it. Nevertheless, Lucian nodded and gave her a look that told her he would relay the message to him. At that, Jones blinked in confusion. "Are there any other factors they need to consider?" Lucian easily said, "Mr. Lon, here's what Roxanne wanted to say. We have to let Mrs. Lon soak in hot water first before performing acupuncture on various acupuncture points on her body. That way, we'll be able to make her regain her mental clarity." "That's fine. Why are you worried about that at a time like this?" Jones was open to trying any kind of method for his wife. Hearing that, Roxanne became a little more confident. Lucian also gave her an encouraging look. Since there was no time to lose, Jones immediately told the housekeeper to prepare a huge tub of hot water while he went to talk to Robert and the other psychologists about it. Once his wife regained mental clarity, the psychologists would be able to take the opportunity to provide therapy for her. Roxanne started cleaning all of her needles with an alcohol burner to sterilize them. Lucian helped her out. Once everything was prepared, Jones carried his wife's thin body into the bathroom. He then slowly took off all of her clothes and gently placed her into the tub at Roxanne's request. The water was so hot that even in her deep sleep, Yennefer furrowed her brows in response. Roxanne quickly moved over to Yennefer with her needles. "Mr. Lon, you can leave now, but please ask the lady who filled the tub earlier to come in," Roxanne told him. Jones nodded and left the bathroom. The housekeeper soon entered. Roxanne then asked the housekeeper to hold Yennefer's body up so that Roxanne could begin inserting the needles from the back of Yennefer's neck. Calm down. The acupuncture session lasted over an hour. Beads of sweat had gathered on Roxanne's forehead. She had been hunched over the entire time, so her muscles were protesting. Nevertheless, she did not think of it as a tiring job, for her focus was fully on Yennefer. When she inserted the last needle into the center of Yennefer's crown, the housekeeper exclaimed, "Doctor! Mrs. Lon is awake!" Upon waking up, Yennefer surveyed her surroundings and noticed the presence of both Roxanne and the housekeeper. She then slowly recollected herself. "Laura, this is..." Yennefer recognized the housekeeper, but she did not know who Roxanne was. Taking in the calm expression on Yennefer's face, Roxanne sighed in relief. "Mrs. Lon, she's Dr. Jarvis," the housekeeper merrily informed her before hurrying out to get Jones. Despite the swell of relief in her heart, Roxanne continued keeping a close eye on Yennefer, fearing that Yennefer's moment of clarity would not last long. Jones rushed into the bathroom with clothes in his hands. When he saw his wife returning to her usual gentle demeanor, he started thanking Roxanne profusely. "Jones, what are you doing? Dr. Jarvis isn't Lucian's wife, is she? I thought they were about to marry. What's going on with me?" One after another, she inserted the needles. Roxanne did every insertion meticulously. Once she inserted the needle, she would even gently twist it so that it would reach the ideal spot to agitate the acupuncture point. "Ma'am, please turn her around," Roxanne said once she was done inserting the needles into Yennefer's back. The housekeeper had to hold onto Yennefer tightly to stop the latter from slipping into the water, and it was laborious. Not long after, both Roxanne and the housekeeper started sweating profusely. It had been a long time since her condition flared up, so the last thing she remembered was a moment from a long time ago. "Mr. Lon, please dress Mrs. Lon quickly. Is Professor Zucker ready?" Roxanne anxiously asked. Jones nodded. Once Roxanne was out of the bathroom, he quickly put on clothes for his wife. "Jones, what happened?" What happened? Did I have another episode? What about our son? Where's our son? We're at home, right? Is our son back in the country?" It seemed like the last thing Yennefer remembered had been their trip to Allender when they encountered thugs. More specifically, the moment when James shot the thugs dead. Jones tensed up. Worried that his wife would recall what happened and revert to her previous state, he quickly redirected her attention by changing the topic. "We're back. We're about to attend Lucian and Roxanne's wedding. You know, the woman from earlier." Jones knew that his wife was most concerned about their son at the moment, but he did not dare to mention James. "Is that so? So that's the miracle doctor, Roxanne. She's so pretty and sweet. She's such a good match for Lucian. Did they come to our place to tell us about their wedding themselves?" Yennefer did not realize Jones was putting on her clothes for her as she chatted with Jones, who was anxious. He then led his wife out of the bathroom and back into the room. The next sight that greeted Yennefer frightened her. Robert had a team of doctors behind him, and they all had grim expressions on their faces. Any ordinary person would be wary upon seeing them, fearing that something bad had happened. Fortunately, Lucian and Roxanne appeared with smiles as they approached her. "Mrs. Lon, I hired these people for a product survey. If it's okay with you, why don't we go to the living room to work with them?" Yennefer had a good impression of Lucian, so her attention went to Lucian immediately as she returned the smile. "Which product is it?" "Lucian, you're about to get married, so why are you still concerned about a product?" "But I have to admit, Ms. Jarvis seems like a sweet and gentle woman." "You two are really a match made in heaven," Yennefer said, chuckling. When Jones realized his wife's mood had stabilized, he inwardly praised Lucian's swift improvisation. To Yennefer, Lucian was just like her godson, so she let him pull her toward the living room. Roxanne then quickly reminded Robert and the others, "Professor Zucker, you have to take this slow. Don't rush it. Just play along with what Lucian said earlier, that you're here for some kind of product survey. Then, slowly and subtly start treating her condition." "Yes. We're professionals, so you don't need to worry about that," Robert muttered and stiffly nodded. The group of psychologists then went to the living room. Psychotherapy providing professional psychological guidance and assistance was beyond Roxanne and Lucian's capabilities. The two left the Lon family mansion, returning to the car where James had anxiously waited for some time. His perturbation was evident on his face. "Lucian, Roxanne, how's the situation? Is my mom all right?" Lucian replied displeasedly, "Well, it's both good and bad. Roxanne has temporarily brought Mrs. Lon's condition under control. Professor Zucker and his team are working on psychological intervention. Don't worry too much, there will be a solution." James was taken aback, apparently not knowing what had happened. Roxanne, however, knew her husband's feelings well and immediately started lecturing James. "How could you keep us in the dark after such a significant matter occurred? You should have been honest from the beginning. So many things happened after the trip to Allender. That's all the more reason you should have informed Lucian right away," she scolded. Only after listening to that did James realize Lucian was mad at him because of that. A guilty look spread across his expression as he tried to explain, "It's my fault. I thought I could handle everything well, but accidents still took place. Lucian, I'm sorry. James, listen to me. Don't try to shoulder everything on your own in the future." Lucian patted his shoulder, feeling somewhat bitter still. Despite Lucian's taciturn nature, Roxanne understood her husband's feelings at that moment. Jonathan and Electra had encountered issues, and now it was James' turn. They were his lifelong friends, people he trusted unconditionally. However, they all withheld their thoughts and kept secrets, unwilling to share the truth with him. James eventually nodded and slowly brought up the past, mentioning his initial intention of becoming a psychologist and the numerous attempts he had made over the years. He hadn't told Lucian the truth because the latter also shouldered many responsibilities after taking over the Farwell family's business. As their conversation progressed, Roxanne noticed an unsettling sign. Deep down, James, like his mother, was also haunted by his aunt's death. He, too, suffered from a psychological disorder. Moreover, as a psychologist, he must have tried countless treatments, but he was still unable to make peace with the incident completely. The crux of the issue lay with Yennefer. Every time Yennefer had an episode, and her hallucinations of Sheba appeared, she would blame James for everything. She would even curse him and wish he were dead. No one could withstand being hysterically berated by their own mother, even if they knew Yennefer was in the throes of a psychotic break. Roxanne felt a headache coming on and looked at her husband. Lucian's eyes also revealed similar concerns. James' mental state is also unstable. James, the past is the past. You didn't cause Mrs. Lon's condition. Don't dwell on it. Trust in Roxanne, Professor Zucker, and the others. Did not die. The couple truly didn't know how to resolve the current predicament. Even with his immense power and her unparalleled medical skills, there were still situations that left them helpless. As they pondered, a sudden burst of angry yelling came from the mansion's living room. It was Yennefer's bellows. What nonsense are you talking about? I'm not sick. How could I be sick? Jones, come here quickly. Who are these people? Are they really invited here by Lucian? I don't want to talk to them anymore, nor do I want to cooperate further with this investigation. Jones hurried to his wife's side, continuously shaking his head at Professor Zucker and the others, signaling them to leave for the time being. But, Mr. Lon, the most important thing is for Mrs. Lon to first acknowledge her illness. She can't avoid it. If she can't even do that, how can we guide her? Robert's expression wore a solemn expression as he emphasized his point. They will help Mrs. Lon recover. Lucian's voice pulled James from his memories. Sensing his lapse, James flashed a sheepish smile. Lucian, I'm fine. But how could he be fine? Using the need to check on the situation as an excuse, Lucian and Roxanne left the car and walked back into the villa. Upon entering the courtyard, Lucian uttered worryingly, "Darling, what should we do? Even James' mental state seems a little off. How can we resolve this long-lasting emotional knot in their family?" Roxanne fell silent too. Although she was a skilled doctor, they were up against a psychological illness. Even if she could prescribe medication for physiological treatment, the heart's ailment ultimately required another form of therapy: reconciliation with one's elf's feelings. The other doctors nodded in agreement. Psychological intervention is about guiding patients to recognize their situation, not to evade the problem. Mrs. Lon's current condition requires her to face the entire matter and comprehend the reality from a logical perspective. No matter what, Mrs. Lon's twin sister has already passed away. Before they could speak more, Yennefer's face suddenly froze, and she became furious the next second. What's that balderdash? My sister, Sheba, is clearly in Zendale, serving as the general manager of our lawn group's subsidiary. You know nothing, yet you're talking utter nonsense. Her emotions escalated, and anger filled her eyes. Get out, all of you! Aren't you psychologists supposed to be making products? Jones, bring Lucian here. Has he been deceived by these people? When Lucian and Roxanne entered and heard Yennefer's words, they exchanged astonished glances. The person who had been serving as the general manager of Lawn Group had always been Yennefer. It turned out that in Yennefer's subconsciousness, her sister had never died. She had attributed all her achievements to her sister. The root cause still lay in Sheba's death years ago. At that moment, Robert and the other psychologists were all grimacing. Noticing Lucian had shown up, Yennefer immediately complained, "Lucian, you must check these people's backgrounds. Do you think they're trying to trick you and scam your money for investments? Is that so? I'll have to interrogate them, then." Lucian sounded as if he was placating a child. However, it worked effectively, as Yennefer's expression softened immediately. "You must investigate thoroughly. 7 or 8 years ago, Sheba was almost deceived by a supplier too." Yennefer seemed to have slipped back into her confused state. Nevertheless, Lucian walked up to her, smiled gently, and handed her a glass of water. "Mrs. Lon, calm down and have some water first. I'll make sure to question these people." With that, he turned to look at Robert and politely said, "Let's pause for now. Tonight may not be an appropriate time. Mr. Farwell, although no one can compare to your achievements in business, we are clearly more professional in handling Ms. Thompson's issue. We don't think your approach is beneficial for her." Robert was stubborn, and his tone was laced with fury. Lucian nodded, acknowledging that the other party was right. Still, he waved his hand, asking them to leave. In the end, Robert left with the psychologists, all of them looking upset and slightly beside themselves. Lucian thought, "This Professor Zucker's emotional control isn't up to par either. He claims he's a specialist, but he has somewhat neglected and behaved insensitively toward the patient's condition." Jones swiftly went to his wife's side to comfort her. In order to help Yennefer regain her composure, Roxanne strode over and initiated a conversation, mentioning the upcoming wedding and asking for Yennefer's help. By creating a new topic of discussion, Yennefer's attention gradually shifted to those matters. "You did nothing wrong." It was late at night when Elias and Sonia realized that the young couple had not returned. Hence, they decided to call in to check on them. Lucian briefly explained the Lon family's situation and told his parents that they were likely going to stay the night. Much had happened to the Lon family, and Lucian advised against it when Elias said he wanted to come over. There was nothing the latter could help with anyway, and it was better if he stayed home and took care of the 3 kids. Only then would Roxanne and Lucian be at ease. "Looked tired," he advised her to head upstairs and rest first. "Lucian and Roxanne, the 2 of you should get some rest too. I'll definitely help out with the wedding. I can't believe Sonia didn't tell me anything even though I'm quite well versed in that matter." After saying that, Yennefer excused herself. Apart from a slight cognitive distortion from time to time, she had returned to her original self. Jones' expression was sad as he remained in the living room. After a long moment of silence, Jones finally forced a smile and comforted Roxanne and Lucian. "It's all right. If there's truly nothing we can do, we'll just have to treat her like a mentally ill patient and bring her to a professional psychiatric hospital for treatment." He was already prepared for the worst possibility. "Mr. Lon, if that's really the case, why don't you give this a shot?" Roxanne suggested as she suddenly thought of an idea. "Give what a shot?" Lucian stared at his wife in puzzlement. Roxanne explained the idea she had in mind. James was a psychologist, after all. Therefore, he could participate in the treatment. However, he carried a burden in his heart and always assumed that his presence would trigger his mother's symptoms and worsen them. Nonetheless, Yennefer's episode had been triggered by the shooting incident in Allender this time, and there was nothing that could prove that her symptoms had been caused by James' presence. I can understand that line of thought, but I'm not sure if James can. Joan's eyes darkened slightly. Lucian immediately said, I'll convince him. Mr. Lon, I'm sure you know how James still has some unrest in his heart. He may have suppressed it for the time being, but it is something he has to overcome one way or another. Mr. Lon, don't worry too much about it. I'm here for you too. I can prevent Yennefer from having a seizure with my medical skills if something goes amiss. Additionally, we should stop giving her sedatives. There will be long-term side effects if she keeps taking them. It will cause the body's endocrine secretion to go out of control and harm her mental state, Roxanne reassured. In the end, Jones nodded in agreement. The couple got into the car and informed James of the situation. James, this is something you and Mrs. Lon must overcome, Lucian emphasized. James hesitated. He found it extremely difficult to make a decision until he saw Jones come over with a smile on his face. The other man patted James on the shoulder. James, I believe in you. We should give it a try. Even if it fails, we can shoulder it together as a family. Over the years, I understood your feelings, and that was the reason why I did not try to interfere. In the end, I am greatly indebted to you. You did nothing wrong back then. Jones' words stunned James, causing a faint light to ignite in the latter's eyes. Over the years, James had long wished for his mother to recover from her illness. He constantly blamed himself for being unable to use a different method to deal with his aunt's nefarious plan. If only he had dealt with it in another way, his aunt would not have fallen into the well and died. James' heart had been constantly tormented by that incident. Dad, you're right. We'll shoulder it as a family. Finally, James made his decision. An important secret, Lucian, Roxanne, the two of you have been up all night. You should go upstairs and get some rest. Upon returning to the mansion and after checking on his slumbering mother, James urged Roxanne and Lucian to get some rest. The two of them realized that the Lon father and son still had unspoken words. Hence, they tactfully went away to allow them to communicate. However, they were quite exhausted as well. That night, the two of them slept soundly. When they woke up the next day, it was already past 9 o'clock in the morning. When the two of them got up to wash up, they heard Yennefer shouting outside the house. Roxanne, Lucian, it's time to eat breakfast. Yennefer appeared to be in great condition that day. She wore a smile as she glanced at Roxanne with a somewhat satisfied-looking expression. When the two of them headed downstairs, James came over and informed them that he had brought his mother up to speed when he saw her that morning. Lucian grew a little nervous. Everything? What was her reaction? Is she willing to go through with it? No, no. Lucian, you're mistaken. I only explained to my mother the current timeline. I told her that she had been in a coma for a long time but omitted the part about you and Roxanne getting married. I think she wants to help plan the wedding. She nearly gave Mrs. Farwell a call this morning. So, that was what happened. Roxanne and Lucian exchanged glances. Good thing it was only a false alarm. If James really told Yennefer everything, the latter was likely unable to hold it together. Roxanne, it was thanks to your suggestion that I met with my mother. I was really worried that my presence would affect her greatly. I did not expect her to be this happy, James said as he glanced at the garden. His parents were watering the plants together. Yennefer was currently nagging Jones about the plants. She had tended to the flowers with great care, and yet weeds and various diseases had spoiled them. James, trust Mrs. Lawn. She's only a little confused right now. You are always very important to her in her heart. Roxanne took the opportunity to assuage James' unease. Lucian was well aware of his wife's temperament. The latter did not enjoy lecturing others. Thus, he followed up with some words of encouragement and added, honestly speaking, I think your presence calms Mrs. Lawn down. I was thinking about the incident in Landor where she had been frightened by the gunshot. Perhaps she had mistakenly thought that you were in danger. Stunned, James fell into deep contemplation. Eventually, a smile appeared on the corner of his lips. I guess I'm not good at diagnosing myself. I tend to think of the worst scenarios. Thanks to Roxanne's Andor guidance, I think I've finally understood the situation better. Roxanne and Lucian were pleased to see James smile. It was as if the latter had finally set down a rock in his heart. Now, the psychological guidance would officially begin. This time, James did not try to escape. Yennefer returned to the hall after she finished voicing her complaints to Jones. James, make sure you entertain Lucian and Roxanne properly. It's so rare for them to visit us. Go bring out your father's private coffee stash, Yennefer said as she greeted the couple with a smile. She felt regretful that she had been unable to attend their wedding because she had been unwell. Roxanne waved her hand and said that she did not mind. She also promised to show Yennefer their wedding photos when they had time. Yennefer grinned from ear to ear. I really envy Sonia. It would be like a dream come true to have such a talented daughter-in-law. You're flattering me too much, Mrs. Lawn, Roxanne replied modestly. James prepared the coffee and served Lucian and Roxanne. Just then, Jones came into the hall, and they began to chat about light-hearted topics. Naturally, the topic of the three children's antics came up. Yennefer was greatly amused. She adored the children and wanted to meet with them as soon as possible. When James felt that the moment was right, he suddenly turned to his mother and declared calmly, Mom, there's something I've always wanted to tell you. It's my most important secret. May I tell you in private? I am Sheba. You're a grown man with secrets. I suppose I'm curious about you now. Yennefer smiled as she nagged James, trailing behind him to the study on the second floor. Roxana and Lucian prepared themselves for the upcoming challenge while waiting outside the room. If Yennefer couldn't withstand the truth and her disease worsened, Roxanne would need to help out immediately. Meanwhile, James had walked into the study. He smiled, initiating a casual conversation with Yennefer. The man couldn't find it in him to turn the topic toward his concern. Mom, do you remember that I skipped to third grade when I was 7 years old, and you were worried that my academic performance was going to suffer because of that? Of course. I remember it clearly. Your homeroom teacher thought you walked into the wrong classroom. Mom, do you recall that when I was in 6th grade, there was an older girl who liked to visit our house? You were worried that she would be a bad influence on me. Yes. She moved to some other places after that. If I'm not wrong, she even went overseas. I ran into her parents after that. They told me she got married abroad. James continued asking a series of questions while Yennefer replied honestly. These were all fragments of James' memories before he turned 13 years old, and Yennefer remembered every detail correctly. Wait, James. Why are you asking me these questions? I thought you were going to reveal your secret. Did you do something bad when you were a kid? Yennefer grinned, her expression loving and caring without showing any signs of impatience. Zendale was an impoverished place all those years ago, and the Lawn family wished for Yennefer to give birth again. Yet, she refused adamantly for James' sake. Yennefer poured all her love into James unreservedly. James observed Yennefer's reaction before determination flashed across his eyes. He said casually, "Mom, do you remember Aunt Sheba?" Yennefer's smile froze instantly, slowly vanishing into the air. Within 2 seconds, her gaze shifted. The calm, peaceful she originally had changed into a malicious glint. James was shocked. He shouted, "Mom! Mom! Can you hear me? Mom!" In response, Yennefer furrowed her brows, wrapping her arms around her head, anguish written all over her face. "My head hurts. James, it hurts." Turmoil was evident in her eyes. One moment, Yennefer looked confused. The next moment, she looked fierce. James was all too familiar with the scene before him. It was always the same old scene over and over again whenever Yennefer's illness acted up. Yennefer's personality would shift when everything was over, and she would become a different person. Mom is going to turn into an image of Aunt Sheba that she created. Oh no! I need to call for Lucian and Roxanne's help. James grew wary of the situation. He raised his voice, standing up, wanting to seek help. Clatter! Yennefer swept the vase off the study table viciously. It smashed to the ground, shattering into pieces with a loud noise. As if engaged in an internal battle, Yennefer complained of a headache repeatedly, clenching her jaws. "Sheba, Sheba. Who's Sheba?" "You're my nephew, James. I'm Aunt Sheba. How could you harm me?" "Ha! Ta-da! I'm not dead yet. You can't kill me." At last, Yennefer's illness acted up again. Her consciousness changed into those of her twin sister, Sheba. A malicious and frosty glint flashed across her eyes as she glared at James with a sinister smile. Meanwhile, Lucian and Roxanne exchanged shocked glances after hearing the commotion. Jones panicked, wanting to charge in. He worried that Yennefer would hurt herself in the process. "Why did you harm me? Let me, Mr. Lawn," Roxanne offered. Lucian reacted quickly, holding Jones back. She turned the doorknob with a silver needle in her hand. James spoke then. "Lucian, Roxanne, please don't come in first. I'll have to face this myself. I'm going to try to get her back." Roxanne halted in her steps. She turned to look at Lucian. Jones felt anxious upon hearing that. "No. We can't leave him in there alone. James. Stop what you're doing. Don't torture your mom anymore. Calm down, Mr. Lon. Lucian instructed coldly. Jones regained his senses. He was still gripped with anxiousness, though. Lucian, what should we do? We can't let her act like Sheba for a long time. That's what Roxanne said, isn't it? Yes. I know. But James is with her now. He won't ever hurt his mom. I'm sure he feels the same way as you. Do you understand what I'm saying, Mr. Lon? Mrs. Lon won't ever break out of this vicious cycle if we let her continue acting this way. Yes, she did feel better after they went to look for an ancient sorcerer in Allender last time, and he used a ritual to heal her. But now, the sorcerer had passed away. Where else would they find someone like him? Lucian pondered about the consequences before finally making the decision to support James. Roxanne immediately understood what Lucian meant after he spoke. She comforted Jones, Mr. Lon, I know what's going through James' mind. Let him try to win over the identity that shouldn't exist if there are two personalities in Mrs. Lon. Maybe it would work out that way. Don't worry. I'll come to his aid if anything goes wrong. Even though she wasn't sure that James' technique was going to work, Roxanne knew she had to promise Jones the best outcome first to steady his emotions. It worked. Jones was finally convinced. James, you make the call. If you notice something is amiss, let us know. Lucian shouted through the study's door. James nodded inside the room as he lifted his eyes to look at Yennefer. No, wait. The person before me isn't my mom. It's Aunt Sheba. She can't accept that her sister is gone. That's why my mom created the personality of Aunt Sheba in her mind. Please sit down, Aunt Sheba. We need to talk. James wasn't able to pin down the reason why he had calmed down completely. Previously, James would break down when he saw the viciousness on Yennefer's face and heard the hurting remarks she hurled at him. But now, things were different. He finally admitted that the personality before him was Sheba and needed to talk to her. What is there to talk about, James? You were the one who killed me. You cruel man, I fell into the well because of you. James, I'm your mom's identical twin sister. How could you do this to me? Yennefer screamed angrily. Her accusations sounded beside James continuously. However, James was no longer afraid of Sheba. Instead, he looked at her calmly. Aunt Sheba, that was an accident. Nothing more. It wasn't my intention to make you fall into the well. Come on. Please have a seat, James stated calmly. Sheba continued staring at him with a sinister, raging glare while gritting her teeth. Why? Why did you kill me? I cared for you sincerely. I bought you everything you wanted when you were young. I loved you so much. A sadness appeared in James' eyes. Yes, Aunt Sheba. You're right. But Aunt Sheba, you were the one who changed first. You began to feel jealous of my mom from an unknown moment. You wanted to replace her, right? James took over the situation, demanding an explanation from Sheba. Please do not cry. Her expression changed drastically. She shook her head violently, trying to deny James' allegations. No. I did not. I didn't change. You killed me. I won't ever let this matter slide. Stop with your nonsense, James Lawn. It's the truth. James snorted coldly. His voice was so loud that even Lucian and Roxanne heard him through the door. Jones twisted his hands together, pacing back and forth. Worry kept niggling his mind, for he was afraid of anything unexpected incidents. Don't forget this, Aunt Sheba. You tried to poison your sister. You wanted to hurt and cripple her so you could be with my dad forever, right? James made up his mind. I need to use poison to fight poison. I have no choice, even if Aunt Sheba would resort to crazier actions. No. I didn't do that. It wasn't me, James. Don't try to deny it anymore, Aunt Sheba. It was you. You even tried to stop me from telling the others. Aunt Sheba, why? Why is it wrong for me to inform my mom about what happened? A long-time professional in psychology, James had never thought he would come face-to-face with consciousness one day, trying to reason with it. Consciousness was different from subconsciousness. The subconscious mind will follow the patient's will, but the conscious mind does not. The one who ended up killing me is you. Yes. You're right, and I blame myself for it. I had no choice, though. I had to protect my mom. Aunt Sheba, you were in the wrong from the start, not me. I'd never thought of hurting you. It seemed like James' words were beginning to affect Sheba. Albeit the rage and hatred still existed on her face, she no longer acted like a wild beast. Oh, my nephew! Why are you still alive? You should be feeling guilty, and your life should end. Don't tell me your mom forgives your actions. How could she do that? I'm her sister. Agony edged deeper into James' expression as realization finally dawned on him. He finally understood why Yennefer was mentally confused and why she chose to create a new personality. My mom never forgives me for Aunt Sheba's death. That's why she is using this personality to unleash her fury. Aunt Sheba, there is not a single day that she feels happy after you leave. It hurts her so much after you died. James choked on his words when he considered Yennefer's conditions from all these years. Aunt Sheba, you are my mom's sister. It's wrong that you tried to hurt her. Why are you still torturing her now when you were the one who committed the mistake? You should disappear and leave. We refuse to be tortured by you anymore. He continued, Mom did enough for you. She treated you better than anyone else in the world. Her biggest mistake was introducing you to my dad, causing you to fall in love with him. You are the one in the wrong. Why do you think it's okay for you to continue pestering us? James threw a series of questions at Sheba. At this moment, he treated the sick Yennefer like the real Sheba. Complicated emotions filled his eyes when he raised them to meet Yennefer's. Sheba was bereft of words, her hands trembling as reluctance slowly appeared on her face. Is that so? Is that the truth? Am I the only one who made a mistake? She tried to defend herself. However, the next minute, Sheba froze. A gentleness filled her gaze. James. I can hear your voice. James, are you all right? Please don't cry, James. Proud of James, Yennefer's eyes were soft, her expression loving. She reached out to caress James' face. Yennefer's consciousness was finally back. Mom. Mom, are you okay? James was delighted, assessing Yennefer's current demeanor. The malicious aura had vanished completely. Yennefer nodded, smiling. James, I've heard all about your secret. Mom, you knew what happened earlier? James asked, startled by Yennefer's remark. Did she hear my conversation with Aunt Sheba? Yennefer nodded. Yes, I've not only heard your conversation with Sheba, but I also saw it happen. It wasn't anything like this in the past. Previously, I've always felt like I'm locked up in a dark cage, unable to see or hear anything, and there is no way I can escape, no matter how much I wish for it. But this time around, I heard your voice. I panicked, trying to scratch my way out. Like a mist, the cage proofed and was gone. Even though I could see you, I still couldn't move. I think it was because your Aunt Sheba knew she was wrong. That was why she released me. Jones pushed open the door and walked in after hearing Yennefer's familiar voice, with Roxanne and Lucian following behind him. Yennefer smiled at them before recounting the details during the period when her sickness acted up. Without the aid of medicine or any treatment, Yennefer's consciousness had returned voluntarily this time. Yennefer said calmly, Jones, James, I can feel Sheba disappearing from my mind. I think I will be fine now. She continued, I've lost my mind previously. Maybe it was because we have strong telepathy as twin sisters, so I subconsciously thought of myself as Sheba. I kept thinking that she died a wrongful death. So many years have passed. It's time I stop thinking that way now. I'm sorry for James, though. He tried his best to heal me all these years. You are the best, my son. Yennefer consoled them when she noticed the others still looked worried. She focused her gaze on James, and a happy smile spread across her face. I can never ask for a better son than James. Anyway, you guys can rest well tonight. Nothing will make me lose my mind anymore. Sheba made her mistake. It was just a coincidence that she died tragically. Also, never did I pay tribute to her once these years. Let's head to Zendale together tomorrow so that I can pay my respect to her in our hometown. Roxanne and Lucian could leave in peace, knowing that Yennefer had finally unraveled the weight that pressed down against her shoulder and got rid of the wrong mindset in her mind. Jones thanked them profusely when the group returned to the hall. Lucian directed his words at Jones and Yennefer. Since Mrs. Lon is all right now, we shall head home. If anything arises again, don't hesitate to call us. Excitement filled James' face as he walked the couple to the front yard. Thank you so much, Lucian. Thank you so much, Roxanne. If it weren't for you two, I would still be running around in circles. Roxanne shook her head, smiling lightly. Please don't talk about yourself that way, James. You showed us your filial piety as a son too. Mrs. Lon wouldn't be able to overcome her inner demons if you didn't put in the effort. Lucian merely patted James' shoulder, saying, Don't forget this. You will have to be serious in your job as a CEO after this. No problem. That's my responsibility. James grinned. Elias and Sonia pestered Lucian and Roxanne for an update after they arrived at the manor after a trip to the Lon family's mansion. The couple recounted the story from yesterday night to Elias and Sonia. They couldn't help but sigh inwardly. Oh! Mental illness is scary. We didn't expect Yennefer's other consciousness to torture her for so many years. Luckily, everything is over now. Sonia and Elias wanted to visit Yennefer after hearing the story. However, Lucian stopped them, mentioning that the Lawn family wanted to head to Zendale. And so, the older couple had no choice but to comply. Comparison Lucian and Roxanne went to the art academy to fetch the kids. When they arrived, there were all sorts of luxurious cars parked at the entrance of the academy. Since the annual tuition fee would cost up to $1 million, only the rich could afford to send their kids there. Having said that, the art academy had some gifted students who were on scholarships. Initially, Lucian had to pay for the kids' tuition fees, but when the academy found out who the kids were and their academic results, they offered the kids to study for free. Obviously, the academy was keen to get associated with the Farwell family, and they were hoping to use the Farwell family's reputation to promote the academy. Generally, parents would think the academy was an excellent institution if they were to see the kids from the Farwell family studying there. True enough, the academy saw an exponential increase in student enrollment after they used the kids to promote the institution both publicly and discreetly. The academy didn't group the students according to their ages, though. Instead, they were grouped according to the art subjects they majored in. For example, there were music classes, dance classes, cinematography classes, and so on. Archie, Benny, and Estella were in the class of excellence, and their class only had over 30 students. The students were of different ages, and they were all geniuses and wunderkinds. Each of them majored in at least a couple of subjects, and some of them majored in as many as 5. Estella majored in design, traditional clothing, history, programming, and a foreign language. Archie and Benny majored in even more subjects. Archie not only majored in history, literature, logical thinking, law, and programming, but he minored in science fiction and investigative memory. In fact, he had repeatedly made use of his incredible memory to help the police crack unsolvable cases. Benny majored in 5 subjects as well, namely history, programming, archaeology, cybersecurity, and business logic. At the same time, he minored in climatology and nuclear power. Among the students in the class of excellence, no one was studying as many subjects as Archie and Benny were. When the kids were walking out of the academy, countless parents and students were talking about them. Those 3 kids are from the Farwell family. The boys look so handsome, and the girl is so sweet. I envy them so much. It's such a blessing to be born in the Farwell family. I can't agree with you. They have an incredible family background, but I'm so jealous of their talents. Not only are they in the class of excellence, but they're the best students in the class. The subjects they major in aren't even popular subjects among kids their age. The way our minds work is no longer comparable to theirs. Exactly. They're so young, but they have already achieved so much in life. That little girl, for example, is the founder of Snuggly. I heard that Mr. Farwell isn't even managing the business. Instead, he gave her a team of people to work with. That brand is now worth billions. Life is so unfair. I would give up 10 years of my life if my kid could be as smart as them. The kids heard about what was said about them, but they were used to it. Nevertheless, they still picked up their pace because they were eager to see their parents. Nobody can ever beat Daddy and Mommy when it comes to excellence. Daddy is the leader of the business world, and Farwell Group is currently the biggest company in the country. Furthermore, it's only going to get stronger in time. Mommy, on the other hand, is an amazing doctor. Not only does she have incredible medical skills, but she also developed lots of new medicines to help patients. The kids rushed toward Lucian and Roxanne the moment they saw their parents. Lucian and Roxanne then looked at each other with affection in their eyes before squatting down to carry the kids into their arms. Archie and Benny threw themselves into Lucian's arms, so Lucian was carrying one boy in each arm. Meanwhile, Estella jumped into Roxanne's embrace. As Roxanne was lifting Estella up, Estella gave her mother a peck on the cheek. Reserved upon getting into the car, the kids started sharing the things they learned at the academy with their parents. Estella made friends with a very amiable young girl who had just joined the class and had a passion for design. Although the young girl was 2 years older than Estella, she was a huge fan of Estella's snuggly. The girl's name is Yvonne Jenkins. Apart from design, she's also good at biology, so she told me a lot about biology. She's polite and humble, unlike the other girls at the academy. Could I invite her over to our house in the future? Estella's eyes were filled with anticipation when she glanced at her parents. Roxanne immediately nodded and smiled. Of course. Since she's a good friend, you ought to offer her your best hospitality. Perhaps you could learn to make a dish or a dessert to welcome her. Sure. Teach me, Mommy. I'll try my best to learn. Estella agreed gleefully. Meanwhile, Archie and Benny were talking to Lucian about the lessons they learned in history class. When they were discussing historical events and figures, Lucian took the opportunity to help the kids improve their understanding of the topics in question. Needless to say, the blissful atmosphere in the car filled Roxanne's heart with warmth. As soon as they arrived at the manor, the kids' grandparents quickly went to see them. Elias was excited to play a game of chess with Archie and Benny, while Sonia was eager to help Estella tailor a dress. Estella had promised Sonia she would tailor a unique dress for Sonia, and Sonia was stoked. Over at the hospital, Jonathan had made it a habit to fetch Madeline off work every day. He had brought Madeline and Lorraine to all the tourist spots around Horrington, and they were planning further road trips. Unfortunately, Madeline had to return to her post. Madeline's recent looks had changed a lot, and she seemed to have become a younger and more lively version of her former self. Upon packing her belongings, she left her office and bumped into 2 female doctors coming from the opposite direction. Naturally, she greeted them. Dr. Xander, I saw Mr. Queen waiting for you downstairs. I envy you so much. You're so lucky, Dr. Xander. You first treated Mr. Queen's gastric, and he eventually became your boyfriend. When will I ever experience such good luck? Madeline's heart raced, and she was blushing when she heard what the doctors said. She then quickly waved dismissively and said, "You guys have gotten it wrong. Mr. Queen and I are just friends." Despite saying those words, Madeline was overjoyed within. Just admit it, Dr. Xander. Maybe Mr. Queen isn't an expressive man, so you should take the initiative to confess your feelings. We're all adults here, so there's nothing to be ashamed of. That's right. Everyone can see how much Mr. Queen cares about you. Didn't he send you a box of peaches a few days ago? It's not the peach season now, so he must have gone through hoops to get those peaches. Madeline was overjoyed when she heard her colleagues teasing her. She then smiled and silently admitted to the wonderful relationship she had had with Jonathan. To avoid letting Jonathan wait for too long, Madeline bade the doctors farewell and hurried into the elevator. A thought flashed across Madeline's mind when the elevator was descending. They're right. Jonathan isn't an expressive man. Since that's the case, should I be more initiative? However, as a woman, shouldn't I be more reserved? No. If I were to make the first move, I would be at a disadvantage in the relationship. Her thoughts were running wild when the elevator door opened. Nevertheless, that didn't stop her from dashing toward the parking lot to see Jonathan's smile. Join our Facebook and WhatsApp group for more updates, link is given in description. Rest audiobook will be continued in next episode.